my colleague, my brother, Dr. Omid Safi.
All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المخلوقات والسيد المرسلين. Thank you so much, friends, for taking time for us to be together. I hope and pray that whatever it is that we're able to share is something that brings us closer to the divine and closer to one another, closer to humanity, starting in those places where hurt and suffering is the greatest. Um, I will be direct and speak from the heart here with you, and hope to leave some time, inshallah, for your questions and comments. I'll tell you where the starting point of my approach is, and I think it's one that anybody who's committed to a prophetic tradition can understand. And what do I mean by a prophetic tradition? It's Amos, it's Jesus of Nazareth, it's Muhammad of Mecca, peace be upon them all. It's the difference between what we kind of see so much being in vogue in the religious context of today, where you stand on some platform somewhere and you're wagging your finger at somebody and you can say, "How could you do this?" A prophetic tradition, the way that sages like Rabbi Heschel, for example, define it for us, is when you stand in the midst of your own community and you go, how could we have become such a people? How could people who are supposed to be on the side of God and the side of humanity allow such things to happen, not only around us, but in some ways through our sanction? Um, a prophetic tradition doesn't ask the question only of how could they do this, and not even how could you do this. It's how could we allow this to happen? And I think that's the question for me as somebody who has hundreds of family members in Iran, and I've been able to get 3 messages to them in the last 11 days, and who's also born and to some extent raised in this country, somebody who's an American citizen, and somebody who recognizes that it's my tax dollars and the political umbrella of my own country, the country whose citizenship I carry, the country where my children are born, that is enabling the slaughter of my own family members. People often ask me these days, do you have family in Iran? And I tell them in all seriousness, yes, I do, 92 million. And then just one layer removed from that, 8 billion. I take that notion seriously because to me, part of being a person of faith who aspires, how in however flawed of a way, to walk in the footsteps of the blessed prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, is that the prophet was sent to serve as an extraordinarily anti-tribal force to overturn and overthrow the notion that who you are and the worth of your being is fundamentally determined by what clan and what tribe you belong to. And the divine scripture that was entrusted to him, the Quran, does not address itself to the tribe of Muhammad, the clan of Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, uh, or even for that matter to Arabs. It addresses itself to that largest tribe, which is the human tribe, the Bani Adam, the children of Adam. Today we would hope that we would say the children of Adam and Eve. And as long as if you're a child of Adam, child of Eve, then in a Christian tradition, we would say you're a child of God. And no child of God is alien to me. No child of God is beyond the sphere of my concern. And to know that human beings anywhere in the world are suffering, that's not only a moral issue, it's a religious issue. And in today's world, unless you just got your head stuck in the sand, um, it's the holy month of Ramadan, so I cannot say things that I would ordinarily say in the South, like unless you got your head stuck up your ass. But you see, it's the month of Ramadan, so I cannot say things like that. So I just have to say, uh, unless you got your head stuck in the sand. We all see examples when the name of God and the name of faith and the name of religion are used to justify the most atrocious of atrocities. And if you think it's not happening in your tradition and your community, keep looking a little bit harder. Um, we know that the recently renamed Secretary of War, and now that's truth in advertising, that's not Secretary of Defense, that's Secretary of War. They should just change his name to Secretary of Murder. That he is sending Christian nationalist preachers who preach a kind of white nationalist version of Christianity to justify this war. Um, Sometimes these people act as if we don't know how to read. Well, guess what? Some of us still read books. And if you haven't looked at it, go and look up Pete Hegseth's book called The American Crusade. He wrote it even before he was qualified to be our Secretary of War by serving as a Fox News weekend host. And look up to see what he says about Islam. Huh? It's not surprising that a person who holds such hateful views of about a quarter of humanity would have no qualms sending bombs and missiles to murder that same quarter of humanity. We have seen the Prophet and the Quran remind us always begin the critique with yourself. Yes, as a Muslim, I know the atrocities that are committed by people who claim to follow my religion. My entire adult life, I've had to deal with Al Qaeda and ISIS. And yes, the tyranny of the Islamic Republic in Iran towards its own citizens. I will never shy away from confronting ugliness, evil, and injustice. And we hope that in the process of looking that injustice head on, that we do not become the very thing that we despise. We have seen the last 2.5 years the most heavily documented genocide in the 21st century. The Israeli genocide of Palestinians, tens of thousands of children, tens of thousands of civilians. Gaza is an utter wasteland, and in the West Bank, Christianity is about to disappear from the land of Jesus, all of which is justified and legitimized in the form of a vile, exclusivist form of what purports to be Jewish nationalism. We've seen in India, under their ruler Modi, a kind of Hindu nationalism. We've seen in Myanmar, Buddhists undertake ethnic cleansing. No religious tradition is immune from this. But what I would like to think is that we can do a lot better than simply preventing religion from doing harm. That religion can be, has been, is, and shall be a force for good, a force for love, a force for beauty, and not just for our own kind. Justice is never about just us. There's something extraordinary that has happened in this generation, largely among y'all's generation, which is that young folks have decided to give a damn about fellow human beings to whom they are not ethnically, linguistically, nationally, or religiously related. You've seen carnage, you've seen suffering of human beings, and you know in that deepest heart of your heart that something just ain't right. That it's not right to drop bombs on people, that it's not right to starve people, that it's not right to withdraw food and water and medicine from people who are hurting. You don't need a college degree for that. You don't need to even study political science and international relations. You don't need to know that it's against the Geneva Convention. You know when you see hungry folks being bombarded by American paid bombs and protected under the umbrella of American sanctions, you know in your heart of hearts, you wouldn't want to be treated that way, and no other human being should be treated that way. I don't care if you call it the golden rule, the silver rule, or the purple rule. Do not do unto others what you wouldn't want to have them do to you. Now, I've had the blessing, as has my dear friend and brother, uh, Professor Calabria, dear Michael, to me, of drinking from multiple fountains. And I'm a student of the history of the civil rights movement. I count myself blessed to have been loved on and mentored by some of the closest friends of Dr. King. And they've shaped my life. They're my own sheikhs as much as my Sufi teachers are. And I remember Dr. King saying that war dulls the conscience of a nation. War dulls the conscience of a nation. And I think part of the task of being a faithful human being is to awaken the conscience of a nation. It's to remind us that there are better ways of living. There are ways of living together, that there's enough for all of us. There's enough food, there's enough water, there's enough air, and more than that, there's enough dignity. That starts with affirming the sanctity of human life. Now, I don't care how you get to that point. If you happen to be a person of faith, I know that if you've read the Torah, if you've read the Gospels, if you read the Quran, you know that we're just dirt. We are dirt. Adam, the earth creature. We are dirt. What changes us from dirt to being the magnificent people that you are is that God breathed something of God's own spirit into us. And in the Sufi tradition, we're taught that for every single child, every single one of you, that before you became who you are, God spent 70,000 years love glancing you. That's what we're taught in my tradition. 70,000 years, God looked with love upon each one of you. And if the God thing doesn't work for you, there's other ways. You are who you are because somebody loved you. You are who you are because somebody sacrificed for you. You are who you are because for thousands of nights of your life, somebody, and let's be honest here, most of the time, a mama, sometimes a baba. I'm one of the good babas, but usually a mama. A mama made that boldest and most courageous decision to put your well-being ahead of her own, even though she hadn't had 8 hours of sleep in years. Like usually we call that torture when people don't let you get sleep. And yet every single one of us had somebody put your welfare and your well-being thousands of days and nights to put their own breast in your mouth, to wipe your shitty bottom, to cuddle you, to kiss you, to comfort you, to hold you. And then comes a madman pressing a button from one part of the world, and thousands of babies, somebody's baby, die on the other side of the world. Something just ain't right. That is an offense not only against the maker, the keeper, and the molder of the stars, it's an offense against every mother and every father who's loved their babies. You wouldn't want that done to you, and don't you dare be silent when it's done to somebody else. There's a powerful account from our beloved Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when one day he is walking around the Kaaba, the house of God, right? I mean, for us, that's the holiest place on earth. We actually teach that it's not even a place on earth. It is, it is a piece of God's heaven that just is, it's like a portal that's opening up in this world. And he's walking around the Kaaba and he starts talking to it. And he says the following. He says, "How beautiful are you? How luminous are you? How fragrant are you? And yet, by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, I swear that the life of one single human being is more precious to Allah than even you are." Hmm? That's what my tradition teaches me. That one single human is more sacred than the holiest temple, mosque, church, synagogue on earth. And already in this last 11 days, 1,500 Kaabas have been obliterated. 1,500 times the American and Israeli forces have dropped bombs and missiles on luminous beings, celestial beings, every one of them more sacred to God than the Kaaba. We got to come to terms with that. We got to ask ourselves, what do we got to say at a time like this? So I'm gonna share a couple of images with you. Um, because I think it's always important to ask the question, what are we not seeing? Whose story are we not hearing? Um, whose humanity are we prevented from seeing? And I want to be clear about what I'm saying and not saying here. Um, I'm old enough that when I started teaching as a professor, the third year of my teaching was 9/11. Um, and for weeks and months after that, we saw story after story after story, interview after interview about the lives of those people from all over the world who were killed on 9/11. That's as it should be. We should see the full humanity of people. There was another time that I saw that, which was on the horrific event of October 7th, where every news channel, regardless of their political leaning, had the grieving Israeli parents talk about their 1,000 children who were killed. We got to see their names, we got to see their faces, we know their stories. We've had probably 100,000 Palestinians killed in the genocide the last 2.5 years. Do you know the names of any of them? Have you ever seen a conversation with their grieving parents? Are they, even if you're on board, even if you're not flinching when I use the G word, the G word that would get me shadow banned on Facebook and Instagram, can you name them? Do you know the names? Names are important. I always tell people, go back and study the history of our own country. What is it that starts the civil rights movement? It's Emmett Till. It's a young teenage boy who is lynched, he's shot, he's beaten so savagely that his head swells up to 4 times its size. And his mama makes the most difficult choice of her life, which is to have an open casket funeral. She says, I want the whole world to see what they've done to my baby. That is what launches the civil rights movement. Martin King, John Lewis called himself the Emmett Till generation. Think about all the people that you know as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Mike Brown. In Iran, it was the same way. There was one Kurdish Iranian woman, Mahsa Amini, who was shot and killed by the Iranian regime. That launched the Women, Life, and Freedom movement. There have been at least 1,500 Iranians killed in this last 11 days by our bombing and joint Israeli bombing. Do you know the name of a single one of them? Could you actually picture a single one of them? And I want to be clear about what I am and I'm not saying. I'm not saying we should not have humanized the victims of 9/11 and October 7th. What I am saying is that I refuse, as a person of faith, I refuse to pretend that the life of an American or the life of an Israeli is worth an iota more than the life of a Palestinian or an Iranian. And to hold that notion as a person of faith is an abomination against God because it's actually placing a greater value on the flag of a nation than it is on the divine breath, the divine spirit that is flowing through each and every single one of you. The minute you say that the worth of a person is determined by their race or by their nationality more than by the breath of God that flows inside of them, that's idolatry. And you cannot be a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim and be an idolater. So I'm going to stop talking in just a few minutes, but in order to remedy what it is that we're not seeing, that we haven't been allowed to see, I wanted to share a few things with you with Professor Calabria's permission. Um, can you all see this?
Yes.
All right. So this is just a map of the bombardment of Iran by American and Israeli forces. Um, I made this slide after 3 days when 2,000 sites had been hit. By now, the number is probably closer to 7 or 8,000 sites. So just imagine 7 or 8,000 sites. Some of these bombs are the size of a car, 2,000-pound bombs that are being dropped on a densely populated city that is bigger than New York. God forbid that something like that should happen here. But imagine the logic of what's we're being sold here. We don't like the government of Iran. I don't like the government of Iran. Therefore, we're going to carpet bomb something that is as densely populated as New York City, right? Imagine other people in the world saying, I don't like Trump. Therefore, we're going to carpet bomb New York and Los Angeles. What does it look like when we bomb these places? Well, on the very first day, in the very first hour, we hit a girls' school, elementary school, middle school. We killed 165 girls. Typical American Israeli thing. They did it to themselves. It was their own missiles that malfunctioned. We didn't mean to do it. Our maps were outdated. And then finally, we got the video that it's the same kind of missile that only the United States of America owns in the world, shot at a girls' school. Every single one of those daughters is a child of God, to use Christian language, is a beloved of God, to use a Muslim language. They're not the children of a lesser God. They're not lesser children of God. Every single one of them worth every bit as much. That was not an isolated episode. In one single state of Iran, Lorestan, 52 other schools have been attacked. We're not going to see this on CNN. You're not going to see this in the New York Times. Forget Fox. When I lived in Iran, we knew that the media was a government propaganda agency. Fox is very familiar to me. Fox is essentially not journalism, it's the propaganda network of the American government. By now, over 20,000 buildings have been hit. Who do you think lives in buildings? People, innocent human beings. Most of them didn't vote for the government. Families. 13 hospitals have been hit, including one of the only pharmaceutical companies in Iran. So Iran is under sanctions, and then when they make their own medicine, we bomb the factory where they make their medicine. We bomb their water plant. These are all war crimes under the Geneva Conventions. And then this is where I grew up. If you look on the lower right part of the map, I lived in that neighborhood for 14 years. It's a beautiful city. It looks something like Denver, with a mountain range taller than the Rockies to the north of the city. And we have been carpet bombing this city of over 10 million people. Not only that, we've been targeting residential buildings. I'm going to show you one video. I do not show dead bodies. I don't think the dead ever consent, but I want you to have a sense of the destruction of one of these 20,000 sites.
باشه.
Last week, we started bombing the oil depositories around Tehran. Iran, as you know, is one of the largest oil producing countries in the world. Um, Remind you of Venezuela. And we have hit, as far as I know, oil depositories don't have a religion and they don't have a political affiliation. The whole of Tehran is covered under a thick fog of toxic smoke to the point that acid rain is falling on the city because of our bombings. In the daytime, Tehran looks like the nighttime as a result of these bombings. There are going to be tens of thousands of people who will get cancer as a result of this. Uh, this picture is Tehran during the daytime. And I have lived through bombings myself. I lived in Iran when Iran and Iraq waged a bloody 8-year war against one another. I've had 11 days of absorbing these pictures, trying to figure out what to say. How do you remain a person of faith? How do you not call down curses on people but still try to respond with love? And it's hard. It's very hard. Um, I watched this video yesterday, and this was the thing that cracked my heart open. Nobody dies in this video. I would not show that. But it was the thing that drove me to tears because I was this little boy. I was this little boy when it was Iraqi missiles who were that were heading the way of Tehran. And I want to make sure that when you're watching the news and you're seeing these arrogant men standing up on the stage talking tough, even though they are so far from danger, that you remember this mother clutching her baby, a baby that she has loved, a baby that she has fed, she has nurtured. He is her whole world. And there comes a time when there is God and there's your mama's arms, and that's all you've got. I want to make sure that in everything that I say about this horrible war, that I keep this boy and this mom right between my eyes. and have lived enough and have traveled enough to know that she could be any of us, and that there are people all over this world who would clutch their babies exactly the same way. Nobody has a monopoly on love. Nobody has a monopoly on justice.
نترس خوشگله من پیشتم ترسیدی؟ منم همینطور منم ترسیدم من پیشتم تو هم پیش منی فکر کنم یه دونه دیگم داره میاد ممکنه دوباره یکم بترسی
Anyway, I think I will stop talking here, and I would love to open it up to you all for questions that you may have. Um, I want you to know that you're not without guidance. That in the darkest of the nights, that the prophets and the sages and the saints are the bright lights that can guide you. Anytime that you hear a teacher, a preacher who sells you things like, follow me and your life's going to be hunky-dory, that's a used car salesman. That's not a man of God. Anytime somebody says, follow me and you will be rich, you'll be successful, you'll be happy, that's not real religion. Real religion is something that says, there will be times in your life where your heart will be shattered, and there will be times that will overflow with joy and with love. And the only thing I want you to know is that the God of the mountaintop is also the God of the valley bottom. And you will never walk alone. Our people, our sages, our prophets, our teachers, our saints have lived through dark and difficult days before. The greatest saintly being that we have in Islam after the time of the Prophet is a great love poet named Rumi. Rumi lived at a time where the Mongols killed 10% of the world's population. 10%. And in the midst of all that mayhem, he stood up and he straightened out his back and he talked about love. And that's why we remember his name. And I think about someone that shapes my own life, Dr. King, and the people around him, Vincent Harding, who was my mentor. And Martin comes of age with Emmett Till and with Rosa Parks. He's only in the public eye for 13 years. He goes from being the most beloved black man in America to being among the most hated at the end of his life. And when he's driving through the South in some of the lowest points of racism, and he's driving past the white churches where pretty white families get dressed up in their Sunday best and they go to church, oblivious to the suffering of black people around them, Martin asked the question, I wonder what God it is that they worship in their churches. That's a Martin we don't get to hear very much about. But I would love for each one of you to find that prophetic fire that mingles with love, not just for your own kind, but for the whole of humanity, so that next time that you see a Netanyahu, instead you think of a Rabbi Heschel. Next time that you see the sellout preachers blessing the president and the frat boy who's doing cosplay as our Secretary of War, daring to talk about Christianity, you remember Jesus and you remember Martin and you remember Vincent Harding and Desmond Tutu. There is a better way, there is a higher path. And asking that question about love and justice and how do we begin with the least of these, that let that be your moral compass and your guide. Anyway, I'm happy to take questions and comment. And I'd really deeply thank you all for the honor of being here with you.
Thank you, Dr. Safi. Thank you, my brother. I would invite anyone to offer a question, ask a question, offer a comment. Anything that you want to ask?
Well, Professor Safi, your last name is my first name. So I'm happy to see somebody else is Safi too. And thank you very much for such a nice presentation. And we could palpate, your own feeling when you were describing these things in your country of Iran also. And we have watched it so much on TV that some bombardment is being done physically in Tehran, and some bombardment is being done through the TV on our minds. We are human beings too, and we feel it. So we all know the details of this, that if you have to change your indication or reason for starting the war 10, 12 times, then you are confused. You don't know that why we are there, just that we are the most powerful army and we can execute and we have the ammunition. But where do you see this thing going? It's, the Iranian people much better than us. And where do you think it's will end up? Just feel nobody knows. One day we hear that, okay, 2 more days, and then, well, we will be there for a while.
Yeah.
How do you see it ending?
Thank you so much for that wonderful question. To predict the future is a fool's task, but we're also fools if we haven't studied history, particularly in a part of the world where people think about history in thousand-year terms. I remember when President Bush, misled perhaps, ended up lying to the nation and said that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. And he led us into a war where he said we would be greeted as liberators. And well, probably close to 1 million Iraqis were killed. ISIS was created. Uh, Thousands of American soldiers were killed, and trillions of dollars that could have gone into the wrinkled stomachs of God's children ended up going to the military industrial complex. Um, Iran is a much larger country, is a much stronger country with about 3 times as many people. Uh, and the Iranian people, no matter if they are deeply religious or profoundly secular, if they have 3 religions, one of them is Islam, one of them is football, and the third one is nationalism. And I'll let you figure out in what order. Iranians are fiercely nationalistic people who take pride in the fact that for thousands of years nobody has conquered them. The one thing that is likely to unite Iranians who disagree about every aspect of religion and politics is the foolishness of a foreign invasion. Um, Apparently, these I'm really searching for the kind word here. I was going to say morons. Um, Uneducated people. Apparently, they haven't studied history. Um, you don't get to have a permanent regime change only through aerial bombardment. They love their war games. They love their power of bringing death and mayhem to people. What they're talking about doing is one series of lies after another. Um, for 30 years, Netanyahu has been saying that Iran is 2 weeks away from having nuclear weapons. And then now they're like, well, actually, it wasn't about nuclear weapons. And then they were like, it's up for regime change. And then now we're told, no, actually, it wasn't for regime change. Um, it's close enough to the sunset time that I'm gonna let myself this. That despicable senator, Lindsey Graham, is on TV gloating about, and this is a direct quote, we're gonna make so much money. I have the clip and I will play it because we're keeping receipts, people. We're gonna make so much money. Um, this is about oil, and it's about enforcing a hegemonic so-called Greater Israel project in the Middle East. And it's about an American political structure that no longer sees itself as bound by morality or ethics or international law or the United Nations or the Geneva Convention. And God help us all if that is the law of the jungle that we're going to see as dominating the world to come. Um, there's no good outcome in this. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the Iranians for just a minute, what possible incentive do they have to accept a ceasefire now? Twice in the last year, they've gone to negotiate, and we in this country have ended up bombing them in the middle of the negotiations. what's the lesson they're supposed to learn? That the only countries that don't get bombed are the ones that actually have nuclear weapons. Nobody's bombing North Korea. Nobody's bombing Russia. The guy whom we have now as the new supreme leader of Iran is the son of the former supreme leader of Iran. He's apparently an even more hardliner. And we killed his mom, his dad, his wife, and his 18-month-old daughter. I'm thinking he's probably going to have some ill feelings. The only thing that at this point our president seems to be looking for is some exit ramp that he can declare victory and move on to the next place in the world to F up, which is probably going to be Cuba. So these are people drunk on power, and there's really one force left on the planet that can stop them, and that's you. It's the people of this country. There is no other force. There is no United Nations. There is no Europe. It's up to us, the people. And the one thing you have to hand to these people is that they tell you what they're going to do, and we are not far from the president declaring that we're in the midst of an unprecedented war, and so therefore elections have to be canceled. How many times does he need to joke with us about wanting to run for a third term before we start to realize that we're in the midst of not only a humanitarian crisis in Iran and in Palestine, but we're actually in an extraordinarily perilous situation for whatever is left of America as a democratic experiment. I mean, I'll hush after this and take another question. But like, do you really think that President Trump gives a damn about the right of protesters in Iran when he did that in Minneapolis? I mean, come on. Y'all are smart people. If this is how he's treating American citizens, what makes you think he gives an iota of a damn about Iranian protesters? And I do. I care deeply about people who are bold enough, courageous enough to fight for liberties and freedoms. More power with them. But the way that you support pro-democracy activists is not by carpet bombing their country. I'm wondering if any of the students might have a question, a request for a clarification.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask because a few days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu identified the nation of Iran with Amalek from the
Yep.
Bible. And I
Yep.
wanted to know how you feel about that, because the only emotion that I can describe from hearing that is just horror. So
Yep.
I want your input on that.
I'll say two things about it. So the first thing is, and I've been saying this for the last 2 years. I cared about Palestine. I'm not Palestinian and I'm not Arab. I care about Palestine as a human rights issue. I care about the Muslim population and the Christian population, and I also care about the Jewish population not living in the situation of domination and supremacy that they're in. I want them to have the dignity of equality. And what I told people is that we had to stand up for Palestine because if we didn't, then we would understand that what happened in Gaza would be the prototype. And indeed, that's exactly what we're seeing now. The way that the Israelis and the Americans, and we're really one entity at this point, uh, are operating is the same rules of law or lack thereof. In Palestine, we carpet bombed urban neighborhoods. In Tehran, we're doing that. In Palestine, we bombed hospitals. In Tehran, we're doing that. In Palestine, we targeted electrical facilities and water plants. And in Iran, we're doing just that. Our treatment of Iran is basically the Gaza playbook. And Netanyahu famously called Palestinians, all of them, Amalek, this biblical group who just have to be entirely destroyed, decimated, wiped off the face of the earth. And he did not stutter, nor did he misspeak. I mean, remember that Yair Gallant, his Secretary of War, called Palestinians animal humans. Yeah. For years, Israelis have been using this language of cockroaches to talk about Palestinians. The same language, by the way, which was used for the mayor of New York City last week by Sid Rosenberg, a radio host who is appointed by President Trump on the board of the Holocaust Museum. These are not people tweeting things anonymously. And I don't believe in there being an Olympics of suffering. I don't think that one group of people on the planet have all of the pain. I think it's distributed unevenly, but it is distributed. But imagine if a person went on the air and astaghfirullah, called Jews or black people or Mexicans cockroaches. I mean, their ass would be out the door before lunch break. And yet, the president of that media organization said Sid Rosenberg is a very good friend. And he said, I stand by what I said. Maybe my tone was a little bit too much. The thing about Netanyahu, to come back to your question, is he has mastered the art of speaking differently to different audiences. He releases video after video addressing Iranians, where he says, I am with you in your fight for freedom and I stand for women's rights. Last thing that Netanyahu is someone who champions freedom. He's a corrupt person who's wanted in the ICC and the ICJ and in Israeli courts, just like our president. When he speaks with Americans, he switches his language because he knows that Trump doesn't give a damn about women's rights or freedom or democracy. He talks to us Americans about Iran is 2 weeks away from having nuclear weapons. Mind you, Israel is the only power in the Middle East that actually has nuclear weapons and refuses to sign the international nuclear agreements and to have them be inspected. And then when he speaks with the Israeli media, usually in Hebrew, that's when he calls Iranians and Palestinians Amalek, i.e., people who have to be entirely wiped off the face of the earth. So he's mastered this political deception of speaking in different tones to different audiences. And the war against Iran, this is his wet dream. And he's very open about the fact that for 30 years he tried to get any American president, Republican or Democrat, to support him. He tried with Clinton, failed. He tried with George W. Bush, he failed. He tried with Obama, he failed. He tried with Biden, he failed. And then came Trump. And so here we are in this awful, awful war. And one thing that I do realize that I have not said anything about, just because of the focus of what we're talking about, I've not talked about the horror that this war has meant for people in the Gulf region and also for people in Israel, and very soon for people who economically are going to suffer from this war all over the planet. There really is a very small group of people, give them whatever name you want. The Epstein class seems to be a good enough name, um, who are dragging the whole world to hell with them. How is that for a cheerful Ramadan, uplifting sermon?
I know we're a bit over time because we started late, but I don't want to cut this off if anyone else would like to ask a question or comment. Andrew.
Yeah, first off, thank you very much. That was amazing. Seeing as one of your areas of expertise is Sufism, I guess to leave off on a brighter note,
Mm.
are there any words from any of the great Sufi masters about like resistance or resilience that you'd want to leave us with?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think the more you go into the love tradition of any tradition, it leads you to recognize that love and justice are linked together. So in the Quran, we get this powerful line that "Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan." God is commanding you essentially to love and justice. Love and justice. Um, and ihsan is the name for that entire realm of Islamic spirituality that has to do with love, with beauty. Um, I like to translate it as the realization of beauty. Beauty all around, beauty within, beauty in your glance, beauty in your words, beauty in your touch. Um, you hear the words of Jesus talking about blessed are the peacemakers. And it's worth asking, if the peacemakers are blessed, what does that make of warmongers? Uh, in the Sufi tradition, there's been a range of perspectives on how do you deal with these tyrannical people. A lot of the Sufis, particularly in the Chishti tradition, the South Asian Sufi tradition, which is very dear to my heart, also to Michael's, uh, the advice has been you avoid them. They walk in through one door, you walk out through the other. Uh, Sometimes some Sufis have said, well, these people need help, so let's go and counsel them. Let's go and advise them. And I'm glad that there are those folks out there. Their task is not to bless the president as he goes to kill, but actually to remind him of the moral and ethical consequence that he and all of us will face. But the funniest of the Sufi stories on that come from Sufis that recognize that actually they're the ones who hold all the power. And they have power because there's literally nothing that these corrupt, authoritarian dictators, kings, fornicators, pedophiles can do to them. Nothing. You have no power over them. What are you going to do? Exile them? Anywhere on earth that they go, that's a place that they can put down their head and pray to God. Kill them? Well, here they are with their beloved, and there they're with their beloved. It's almost like you can't touch me. So one of the Sufi sources that I love very most, this is a Persian source called the Rose Garden. In the East, This is how you learn to actually speak. Everybody studied it. I started studying this text in Iran in second grade. And there's a king. The first chapter of the book is Counsel for the Kings. And there's a king who goes to one of these Sufis and he says, pray for me. And the Sufi's like, I don't really think you would want me to. And the king is like, no, 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 I insist. Pray for me. And the Sufi's like, really? I don't think you would like it. And the king is like, damn it, I'm the king. I insist. Pray for me. And he's like, fine, God, kill him. And the king is like, what the hell kind of prayer was that? And the Sufi goes, by he in whose hand is my soul, this is best. It prevents you from accumulating even more sins, and it liberates humanity from your tyranny. The very next story, the king goes to a different Sufi. He's like, I'm going to get a second opinion. And he goes, of all the righteous deeds that I do, all the acts of mine that are meritorious in the eyes of God, which one is most pleasing to God? And the Sufi, without missing a beat, goes, it's when you nap in the afternoon. Because at least in the middle of your nap, you're not oppressing anyone. Uh, those are the men and women of God that we've got to become. People who love God and love truth and know that love is the path and deeply care about the least of God's children. And at that level is where you find what the Quran would call the Majma'ul Bahrain, the mingling of the two oceans, of the deepest part of Islam and the deepest part of the Christian tradition, where the very same passages that are put in the mouth of Jesus are put by the Sufis in the mouth of the Prophet, where we're told that in the day of judgment, God's going to ask people, I was hungry, but you didn't feed me. And people say, how can we feed you? You're the God of the whole world. If you'd gone to the hungry, you would have found me with them. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me something to drink. Oh, Lord, you created the rivers and the oceans. How can we give you something to drink? If you'd gone to the thirsty, you would have found me with them. If you'd gone to the sick, you would have found me with them. If you'd gone to the homeless, you would have found me with them. So in the Sufi tradition, there's really this idea that you can think of it as a divine withness, that God is with everyone, but there's a particular preference that God has for the brokenhearted, for the suffering. And if you want to, there's a great Palestinian Christian who gave a sermon recently. If you want to find out where God is under the rubbles of Gaza. God is not in the White House and God is not in the almighty cathedrals. It's you look for God in the rubbles. You look for God in the places that are bombed. You look for God in the places that are starved. You look for God amongst those who are frightened.
Thank you, my brother. It's always good to hear from you and to hear the love that you express, that you know, and that you share. And what more can I say? Jazakallah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. You're very beloved to me, and your friends here are now beloved to me too. May God bless you, illuminate you, protect you, and make your lives whole, inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda hafiz. Bye bye.